A warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined here in segment number 2 for this Conference USA Conference Preview Edition by Zay Galindo. He does great work over at 600 ESPN in El Paso. We're going to be diving in on the trends of Conference USA. We're going to be taking a look at all these rosters, taking a look at just what makes these teams tick in general. He does an amazing job there. Joined me for this conference preview last year, so it's great to get him back aboard. So he is going to be joining me in segment number 2. And yes, this is back-to-back conference previews for this podcast. So that means any news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last pretty much 72 hours are going to be polished up on the podcast tomorrow, but do want to get you guys these conference previews. It is currently the All-Star break out there in baseball, so we've got a little bit more time on my hands, so it's always a lot of fun to be able to dive in here. And then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector finish for this fine conference, and here in segment number 1, we're going to be diving in on the betting trends and just the styles of play that we've got in Conference USA in general, where we're going to be seeing some new teams coming in as well, so that makes it some good, clean family fun. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larsium, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever they want. They make sure that 100% of gambling transactions are approved. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, make sure you type in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G, and you can see a $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. So now that the formalities are squared away, let's take a look at a Conference USA that had a lot of pretty good defenses last year. It was really a divide between the haves and the have-nots, but I mean, this is a conference that in general, it was spotty with regards to three-point shooting. I think that that's very fair to say. Like, you just take a look at some of these teams and the way that they struggle from three-point range, and you do have to think that Delaware, who comes on over from the Coastal Conference, they're going to be able to have a little bit of success right away, perhaps. They were 21st in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They were at 37.7%. Now, I will say Liberty 6th in the country with their three-point shooting percentage. It shot 39% from three-point range away from home. That was very rock solid, but I mean, outside of them, you had a lot of teams that they weren't able to knock it down from three-point range. Western Kentucky, 277th in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. New Mexico State was just a complete nightmare, 325th in the country in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. Middle Tennessee wasn't the worst team in the conference, but still 282nd in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Kennesaw State, we give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They were a team that was very solid on defense, and on offense, they were 331st in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. So, and a lot of teams that were rough there. Florida National, 357th in the country in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. So you just go down the list, and it was a cavalcade of different teams that they just weren't really able to knock it down from three-point range, and that was very, very rough, to say the least. And then when it comes down to it, with regards to this conference, you're going to be able to get some pretty rock-solid defenses, as you do have quite a few teams that they were able to clock in the top 75 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, with Liberty being chief among them. They were the team that represented in the NCAA tournament last year, and they were 20th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They were the leaders and the creme de la creme there. Really had nobody else that was able to crack the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but a team like New Mexico State was able to finish up at 72nd. They were able to do a nice job defensively. You had a team like a Jacksonville State, for example, who did a really good job of locking down in terms of not allowing a lot of good three-point shot looks and everything like that, but they just weren't able to generate any turnovers, and that was a hallmark of many of the teams in this conference. Western Kentucky was 84th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Louisiana Tech just on that outside the top 100. They were 104th, in Florida National, they were 92nd in the country in terms of their own points allowed on a per possession basis. And then you just take a look at the way that these teams were able to lock down from three-point range. That was really what was marvelous in my opinion, with New Mexico State leading the way play, 6th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Team shot 29.5% from three-point range against them. Then you have Western Kentucky, 22nd at 30.5% from three-point range. Louisiana Tech was 28th, 30.8% from three-point range. So you just go on down the list, and these teams were able to do a really good job of not allowing some good open looks. Middle Tennessee, 55th in the country in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage. So these teams did a really good job of locking down there, and you just weren't able to find those open looks from three-point range. Meanwhile, if you take a look at the betting trends of Conference USA, I thought that these were very intriguing as well, because it is a pretty spread out conference. It's now going to be even more spread out with the fact that you've got yourself even more teams in this conference. Man, when it comes to Delaware, they were a team that they really struggled on the road last season. They went 6-8 against the spread while they were part of the Coastal Conference, and for Delaware just as a whole, this was a team that was a little bit of a disaster class with regards to their defense, but still, they were able to go 17-17 against the spread. You could do a little bit worse than that, and for Conference USA, you did have a few very, very profitable teams. As a matter of fact, 4 different teams covered at least 60% of their games. Middle Tennessee, 18-12-2 against the spread. Liberty, 20-11-1 against the spread. Jacksonville State, 21-11-1 against the spread. At Kennesaw State, we give our own to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, 20-10 against the spread. The one team that really struggled against the spread was Sam Houston State. They were 9-19-1 against the spread. That was very much less than savory, to say the least, and they were at one point the worst against the spread team in all of college basketball. Picked it up a little bit more towards the back half of the season, and you did notice that in Conference USA, some of the teams that struggled in non-conference play because things are just so evenly matched, for lack of a better term, out there in conference play, they were able to rise up a little bit more. Like, you just take a look at these teams in non-conference play. The lone 2 teams that didn't hit north of 55.5% of their games against the spread outside the conference were New Mexico State and Sam Houston, both going 3-7 against the spread in non-conference play. Louisiana Tech was 7-2-1 against the spread. You had Western Kentucky go 7-2-3 against the spread. Jacksonville State 9-3 against the spread in non-con. 8-3 for both Liberty and Middle Tennessee, with Tennessee having a push thrown in there as well. Kennesaw State, go Owls, 6-4 against the spread in non-con play. FIU 7-5 against the spread, and then UTEP 5-4-1 against the spread. And then when you took a look at how things went in conference play, it was so rough for Sam Houston State, 6-12-1 against the spread. But you did notice a little bit of a rise up as well with regards to what you were able to get out of New Mexico State, them going 10-9 against the spread in conference play. And Kennesaw State was really that good team in conference play, 14-6 against the spread with that regard. And then if you're looking at these totals, like I said, you had a lot of teams that they really embrace defense. And when it comes to the tempo, in terms of a lot of these Conference USA teams, you do have quite a few up-tempo teams. Now, some of these teams aren't necessarily playing at warp speed, though. Western Kentucky, don't tell them otherwise. Over the last few seasons, this has been a team that has really been looking to speed things up ever since they got rid of Slick Rick Stansbury, as they were 13th in the country with regards to total possessions per game last year. And it was sort of a hodgepodge, and you're going to be having a team in Delaware that is going to be probably cranking up the tempo a little bit more in this conference, as Delaware, they were number 100 in the country with regards to their overall pace of play. And you've also got Missouri State, who's going to be entering into the conference as well. For Missouri State, 289th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. We all know that Liberty is going to be that very slow, very controlled team, 285th in the country in terms of total possessions per game last year, and that for their standards is fast. Florida National is always a fast team, 61st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Kennesaw State, go Owls, always a fast team as well, number 44 in the country with regards to total possessions per game. And Jacksonville State, they continue to be steady Eddie, 308th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Didn't have a lot of mid-tier teams like Middle Tennessee. They really sped things up last season themselves. They were 63rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So we have been noticing it's a big divide. Either you're super duper fast or you're super duper slow. There's not a lot of in between with regards to this conference. Like Louisiana Tech was one of the closest teams to being somewhat neutral, and they were still 261st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So that's going to be an interesting look. And then with regards to the overall totals, if you take a look first things first at what you were able to get out of Delaware, they were a team that was very much of intrigue because they did a solid job with their three-point shooting, and boy, oh boy, were they not playing a lot of defense. And they were one of your better mid-major teams in terms of being able to hit overs last season while they were out there in the Coastal Conference for Delaware. 23 overs to 11 unders. Meanwhile, if you're looking at Missouri State, who's going to be entering in the conference, 14 overs to 16 unders, so a relatively even Steven team there. And then in terms of the teams that are going to be coming back from seasons ago, you had quite a few teams go under, with New Mexico State being chief among them with the way that they slowed things down, played some great defense, 9 overs to 20 unders. Then Florida National, 12 overs to 20 unders. Western Kentucky, 12 overs to 19 unders. Kennesaw State, 12 overs to 18 unders. Jacksonville State, 13 overs, 19 unders, and a push. Louisiana Tech was able to go 14 overs, 15 unders. And then you had two teams go either 17-12 or 17-12-1 to the over. That'd be UTEP along with Sam Houston State. And much of this just was conference games being very much slow and controlled. The only team that played more overs than unders to be able to be profitable, because Liberty was break even at 52.4%, 11 overs to 10 unders. That'd be UTEP, 12 overs to 8 unders. In conference play, New Mexico State, they went 4 overs and 15 unders, 6 overs, 14 unders, and a push for Jacksonville State. Western Kentucky, 6 overs to 13 unders, 7 overs to 13 unders for Kennesaw State and Florida National, and then either 9-10 or 9-10-1 for Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech, and Sam Houston. So that's what we noticed trend-wise with regards to Conference USA, and that's what you could expect out of them moving forward. And then one team that I did not discuss quite yet that is going to be entering into the conference that I think is going to be very intriguing. Let's discuss them a little bit in passing, but that would be what we're going to be able to get out of Missouri State. Missouri State last year was a team that actually went 16-13-1 against the spread, despite the fact that they had a 2-18 conference mark, which I found that to be very hilarious. They were a team that they just lost a bunch of games that they were very pesky, and they got a little bit undervalued towards the beginning part of the season as in conference play 9-11-1 against the spread. So those are the betting trends and the styles of play that we've got in Conference USA. Coming up next, we're going to be chatting with Zay Galindo as to what we're going to be seeing in this fine conference and breaking down all of these teams with him on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast, the Conference USA Conference Preview Edition. Here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and this is the Conference USA Conference Preview Edition, and it's great to have Zay Galindo aboard, who does a absolutely tremendous job over at ESPN 600 out in El Paso, taking a look at all things Conference USA, taking a look at what we're all getting in this fine game of college basketball, and so much more. I know he's got his finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything with regards to what is happening out there in the great state of Texas, which, by the way, for those that don't know, El Paso actually quite close to New Mexico as well. And you're able to find my Twitter/X at UTEPZay. That is Z-A-Y. And Zay, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk some college hoops. Haven't done that in a while, right? It's been a hiatus from college hoops. Everybody's focused, especially in this part of the offseason, on football, but I can never pass up the opportunity to talk about some Conference USA basketball. So thank you for having me aboard.
And thank you for joining me. And Zay, we do have ourselves a lot of fun to be taking a look at in this conference. And how about if we start first things first with UTEP, as they're one of many teams in this conference that are going through some changes, to say the least. With regards to this UTEP Miners team, they lose pretty much each of their top 5 scorers from a season ago. They've been built around being able to generate turnovers. Do you think that that is going to be the same for them this season with bringing in a little bit more size with Watson squared?
Yeah, with UTEP, right, it's tough because when they're playing the right brand of basketball that Joe Golding wants, it looks beautiful, it looks fun, it looks like, wow, there's no team this team can't beat. But then one thing goes wrong, and it's just a slide downhill, right? It's tough to explain. So they really did retool this offseason. Like you said, they lost a lot of their scoring. They picked up a good amount of sizable guards. These are 6'5", 6'6" guys that are going to be in that backcourt. And it looks, once again, their main priority is going to be defense. It'll be interesting to see what they do on the offensive end, but I'm excited, right? I'm excited because I wouldn't say they have a lot of NIL to spend, but when you compare it to Conference USA, it is among the top, and they got some pretty good guys. So I think Joe Golding has the right tools in place, but he's had the right tools in place in the past, and they just haven't been able to get over that hump. We'll see if this is the year that he can finally do it.
Yep, we certainly will, and I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get out of this UTEP team moving forward. And this has been a team that's been towards the top of Conference USA for quite a while, and they're a little bit more of the opposite of what you're going to be finding out of UTEP. That would be Louisiana Tech, who really built themselves down low with Daniel Batcho and company. Unfortunately for Daniel Batcho, well, it is one of those cases where he is no longer with the program, but they still have a lot of great size. They did a nice job being able to retool via the transfer portal. And how do you take a look at a Louisiana Tech team that last year they were actually really good with regards to their three-point shooting defense?
Yeah, with Louisiana Tech, it's a good program. I remember hearing a lot of different things about their NIL that at one point, I think a couple years ago, they had absolutely nothing. But Coach Hester and his crew did a good job of just going out there and fundraising the community. That's a good, fan base to have in Ruston. And I picked up some nice guys in the offseason. Like you said, they lose Bacho, but I like this Scooter Williams guy that they picked up. He's from East Texas A&M. He averaged 11 points per game, and he was just all around a really, really good player. For them, it's about retooling, getting the right guys in place, and I'm excited, right? We'll see how they do with no Bacho, because last year people figured them out, right? Just stop Bacho, and maybe Sean Newman will be able to do something with it, but most of the time it was stop Bacho, and you really figured out the Bulldogs. So we'll see what they do to kind of not be as one-dimensional.
Yep, I think that is going to be so interesting to see if they're going to be able to do that, as Zay Galindo, who does great work over at 600 ESPN Radio out there in El Paso, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And what if we take a look at a newcomer in Delaware, where they were a really good three-point shooting team in a conference where three-point shooting has been very hit or miss from teams not named Liberty, but they really didn't play a lot of defense. Did play their best basketball at the end of the season last year, as they were to make a run in the Coastal Conference Tournament all the way to the final. But I do think that they enter in with, shall we say, a few question marks, especially on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, for Delaware, they're a new team in the conference, like you said. I want to see how that transition really, how it works for them. They're going to have to do a lot of traveling. You just talk about it from looking at a map, going from Delaware to El Paso or Delaware to Las Cruces. That's a trip that you don't want to take on a Thursday, evening in the winter, So it'll be tough for them, but I wouldn't say I have high hopes for them. They didn't pick up much from what I saw. They didn't pick up much in the transfer portal. They picked up a couple, but they'll mostly rely on their returnees, right? I see Tyler Hauser. He was one of the guys that I really took note of. And Houston Emery, they have a lot of bigs. They have a lot of depth there, and that's something that I'm excited about. But are they going to have that guy? Who's going to be that guy for them? That's a big question. I think in a lot of mid-major conferences, sometimes all you need is that guy. We saw that last year with Pierre at Jacksonville State, right? Jaron Pierre. He had an absolutely incredible breakout year. Jacksonville State was among the top of the conference. Sometimes all you need is that guy. And can one of their newcomers really break out? That's the big question for me.
Yep, that is going to be a big question. And then the other newcomer in Missouri State, they're very much going to be relying upon their returnees as well. Someone like a Michael O.C. Bonoso was very rock solid for them. Now, Missouri State over in the Missouri Valley Conference last year went 2-18 in conference play, but they were actually profitable against the spread because they played a lot of games close. They just weren't able to come through in the end. How do you take a look at their transition? Because I do think that the Missouri Valley Conference might actually be just a scotch of a step up to Conference USA, but it was very much a struggle for Missouri State to close things out last season.
Yeah, it'll be tough. Like, same thing with Delaware, making that jump to Conference USA. Obviously, like you said, the Missouri Valley Conference is one of the best. I think it might be at times better than Conference USA, so that level of competition isn't, as different as it would be from the CAA to the Conference USA. But 2-18 is unacceptable, no matter what conference you're in, and they're going to need to turn it up. They're really going to need to turn it up. Like you said, Osei Bonsu, 11 points per game. They got Zaxton King, 9 points per game. So they have some returnees, some guys are pieces that they can fit in there, but they're going to need to rely on some of these transfers. Darian Sutton from Georgia Tech, he only averaged a point a game, but when you're playing in the ACC, that could happen, right? Antoine Burnett from Grambling State, he averaged 10 a game. I'm excited for watching some Missouri State hoops. I'll be honest, I've never seen Missouri State hoops before. I'm a college basketball fan. I've never tapped into a Missouri State game, so I'm ready. I want to see what that fan base brings, but I wouldn't expect much out of them either.
Yep, I do think that might be a little bit of a rough go for them here in season number 1. We shall see what is going to be happening on that front, but I take a look at this team, and they're obviously going to be pretty rock solid. That'd be New Mexico State, really great on defense last year. Actually, a top 10 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Offense left quite a bit of something to be desired, and I think the big question for them is, are they going to be able to get that defense back on par to be able to help out, or are they going to be able to get that offense going to be able to help out what is a tremendous defense?
Yeah, with NMSU, they bring a couple back, right? The biggest one, I think, being Christian Cook, but they really dipped into the transfer portal. I think that the Aggies, they've done a good job, I think, just going recruit for recruit with a lot of teams in Conference USA. The past 2 years, they've done really, really good at getting talent out of the portal, and that's no different, like I said, this year. Jason Hooten, he's done a really, really good job of getting people to go to Las Cruces, one of those being Chris Terrell, right, from Delta State. Whenever you don't go D1 in the transfer portal, it's a bit of a question, but with a guy like this, I mean, you average 20 points a game. I want him. And I've seen the way he plays. He's a really, really good, smooth player. Jalen Randall from Southern Indiana, another guy, averaged 15 points per game. They have a lot of guards on this team, which is going to be interesting, right? It'll be interesting how that flows, how that mixes, especially when you have a lot of guys who score a lot of points per game. How are two 20-point players going to, mesh well on the court together? How do their play styles come together? And that's the big question I have for them. But the talent is there, no doubt. And I think the Aggies have a shot to really make some noise this year in Conference USA.
Yep, I think that they've got a chance to be able to make a lot of noise as well, and I do think that's going to be a nice year for them. And then I take a look at this team, and they're always a pretty steady team. They're typically not a team as winning the conference, but I know it was a nice burst out for them last year in Jacksonville State. We always know that the defense is going to be there, and last year Jerome Pierre was really able to uplift that offense. I think that the question becomes, where do they get that offense now that Jerome Pierre is gone?
That's the big question, right? That's the big question, and it'll be tough because last year they played tough. They were a tough team to play against, even before they were the top of the conference, right? Early season games. They just had it together, right? They built around Pierre, and it just ended up being that Pierre was a star, and it worked out perfectly for that team. Now, who's going to take his spot? That's what you said. Benjamin Baela, he's someone that UTEP recruited in the past. He comes from ECU, Eastern Carolina, and I think he's French. I don't remember. I think he might be French, but I remember he's a JUCO guy. He's a guard, and he's just a smooth player. He uses his 6'6" frame, and he gets into the lane really well. Averaged 12 points per game in the American Athletic Conference. That's a tough thing to do, right? You don't just get those guys falling from the sky. He must have cost a big buck, and I'm expecting him to be the guy that they rely on at times. AC Bryant, a lot of people want to dog on the SWAC and everything, but Alabama A&M, no matter what level of play that you're at, your Division I basketball, and I think that AC Bryant has a lot of talent. He's from Shreveport. Together, that backcourt's going to be interesting, but I'm a little bit more optimistic on Jacksonville State than most people.
Yep, I do think that defense is always going to be a constant for them. They're always a good rebounding team, but the question becomes, what are you going to be doing without Jerome Pierre? Zay Galindo, who does great work over at ESPN Radio in El Paso, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then Florida National has been a team that has really relied upon a one-man band throughout the last few seasons. Last year, it was Mr. Brewer that was able to step up for them. They've always had that one guy that's averaging like 15-plus points per contest that everyone follows, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how this backcourt looks this season with Julian Mackey coming in from Houston Christian, 15-point-per-game guy. Corey Stevenson was rock solid over at Bakersfield, and then Zwade Jackson, who you know him from New Mexico State, he was rock solid for them, was a very good go-to scorer over at West Georgia, and I feel like with Florida National, might be a little bit more balanced for them this season.
Yeah, with FIU, it's tough. It's a tough job in general, right? They go 10-23 last year. It was a rough year. I think they only returned 3 or 4 guys, and no matter where you're at, you want to have at least maybe 5 or 6, even in this day and age. I know it's tough, but you want to have at least 5 or 6 guys coming back. It's hard, but like you said, Zwade Jackson, he averaged 10 points a game for the Aggies last year, and honestly, watching them, and I watched a lot of Aggie basketball, so I thought Zwade Jackson was one of the best players on the court, no matter who they were playing. That's a really good pickup. Corey Stevenson from Cal State Bakersfield, another good guard. So they have, some guys in place, but I just don't think they have the depth, to compete in Conference USA. And I just don't see anything special from Florida International when it comes to their offseason. And I hope for the best for that team because it's a program that, hey, if you get it woken up, you get it going, it could be really fun, right? Miami, not really known as a basketball city, but why not make it one? Why not FIU, right? They just have to put some things together, and we'll see what happens with them.
And if I'm not mistaken, Pitbull actually funds the football stadium and has a brand sponsorship there. So, you know what? Let's see if they could get the party started. And certainly there has been a party ever since Liberty joined the conference as they were able to make the NCAA tournament last year, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. While they do lose some of their top guys, and you actually had someone drafted in the NBA draft this past season from Liberty. That was a bit of a surprise. But that said, I look at this team, and once again, it does feel like they're going to be a gold standard in this conference with so many great three-point shooters and such a distinct style.
Liberty, they had that down year the first year they joined, right? And last year they started off hot. They struggled a little bit in the beginning of conference play, but after that it was smooth sailing. They dominated the conference, and like you said, Talon Peter got drafted, which was really, really unexpected on my end. But I know he's a baller, right? He was their sixth man, I think, for most of the year, which is even funnier. But he was by far probably their best player. I think he averaged 14 points per game, and he's a knockdown shooter. So that's a tough loss. But for the most part, I mean, Liberty returns their big three. Colin Porter, Zach Cleveland, and blanking on his name right now. But
Xander
they
Yates?
return three big. Yeah, they return a lot of guys. It's basically run it back. Run it back for Liberty. Do the same thing you did last year, but with even better guys that have progressed, developed, and I'm excited for them. They even returned Owen Aquino. I thought he had a really, really good season as well last year, the big man. So they have the right pieces. They should, without a doubt, be the favorite to win Conference USA again. And they should be among the top teams when you're talking about mid-major basketball.
Yep, they should be, and I do think that they're going to be one of those teams that once again busts out and has an absolutely massive year. And I take a look at this bunch, and I think that this could be a relatively good year for them as we give our to Lane Kiffin goals for Kennesaw State. They're a team that I really like the fact that they bring in Simeon Cottle. He last year for them was so rock solid. He gets a return for them, and then you have quite a few other attorneys like Jamel Miller or Braden Liu. This team was really good down low. They need to cut down on the turnovers, but Devin Cosby, I think, is one of the best transfers coming into this entire conference, and I think the Kennesaw State could make some big noise in season number 2 in Conference USA.
Yeah, I mean, Cosby averaged, I think, 6 points a game in the ACC. You don't get that caliber of player a lot of times in Conference USA. A proven guy at the Power 4 level, so that's a nice pickup for Kennesaw State. And I think they also got Perry Smith from NC Central. He averages 11 points per game. He's a big man. Big men are expensive, so no matter, what, the stats say this and the third, if you have a proven big man on your team, I'm a big fan. And like you said, Simeon Cottle, he's been there his whole career. It's pretty rare to see in this day and age. I think he averaged like 15 or 16 points per game, maybe even more last year for Kennesaw State, and they were really good. Of course, part of that was due to, Adrian Woolley, the star freshman that's, since transferred. But even without him, I think they stack up among, the best Conference USA teams, and wouldn't expect me to see it in the top 4, top 5 finish for them.
Yep, I think that they're going to be rock solid once again, and I think that for Kennesaw State, after it was a little bit rough in terms of closing out games for them last season, I do think that they're going to be able to rise up this season, as we do have Zay Galindo, who does great work over at ESPN Radio in El Paso, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I think this team is interesting with Western Kentucky because they do lose quite a bit from a season ago, and I'm very interested to see what Brian Selbangwe is able to bring to the table. Last year at McNeese, it was a down year, but a few years ago at Tulsa, he was a 9.5 rebound per game guy, and it really felt like they went big. Even Luis Simona was able to shoot it well from 3 over at Stone Hill, has some size. You've got someone in Grant Newell who was over at North Texas, so it's all about tough, tenacious defense. This is going to be a very intriguing team, but for Western Kentucky, do have a few question marks with regards to that backcourt.
Yeah, that backcourt, it should be interesting, right? They've been spoiled in the past, right? They had Don McHenry for a while. They had the guy Xavier. I forgot his name. He was so good. He was a point guard. I only transferred to Xavier. He was really good this year as well. He was there a couple years ago. So, I mean, no shortage of talent in Western Kentucky and Bowling Green. Kentucky. I love that city, by the way. But Grant Newell, right? Like you said, North Texas, winning culture. I think even though he didn't average a lot of points per game, even though he didn't light up the stat sheet, he's coming from a winning program, and you need that type of culture, in your program. And I like that pickup for them. Ryan Myers from Western Illinois and Cam Hafner from Evansville. Those two guys, I think they picked up, are going to be really, really good. I don't know if they're going to solve the backcourt, questions, but they're going to be the guys, I think, that are going to take up that 1 and 2 guard spot. And they picked up LJ Hackman from a JUCO. He averaged 17 points per game at Jones College. I'm excited to see Western Kentucky. Hank Plona, we'll see what he does. Second year with the team. They're coming off a couple years ago. They were in the NCAA tournament, so they can do it again. We'll see what happens with the Hilltoppers.
And you were thinking of, I believe, Davion McKnight a little bit earlier ago. And you're thinking of this team as well as one that's going to be of intrigue. Sam Houston State, who had their second losing season over the last 21 years. They bring in Po' Boy King from NC Central, who was very rock solid over there. But I do look at this team, and I do have some question marks. They lose all their top 6 scorers, so guys like Brennan Burns and company are going to need to step up. Isaiah Manning, who didn't get out there on the floor too much for TCU, but was a highly touted prospect a few seasons ago, comes in. How do you take a look at a Sam Houston State team that I love what King is able to bring to the table, but feels like outside of him, there's quite a few question marks?
Yeah, that's the conclusion I came to as well when I was doing my research on them. And I think they have maybe 4 or 5 returnees. Demond Nicholas, he got hurt early last year, but he returns for them. He's a really good guard. He'll probably be the heart and soul of this team. They'll rely on him a lot. Talked about King. He was an all-MEAC selection from North Carolina Central. He's really good. Cashy Nat was an NAIA star from LSU Alexandria, but when it comes to the headliners, those are really the only three names that I saw. I mean, who else is going to step up for them? That's a question for once they hit the court, because I really didn't see anything that jumped off the screen to me when it came to Sam Houston State. And like you said, it's a really good program over the last years. I know they lost their coach to New Mexico State, but even then, the first year they were in Conference USA, they were one of the best teams. They won a conference championship in the regular season. So there's no reason they can't redo that, but for now, they project to be a subpar team, right? They project to be at the bottom of this conference that when you look at his really, really level, one or two players can take you over the top, and Sam Houston doesn't have those one or two players.
Yep, they certainly do not. And when it comes to Po Boy King, I think that he's going to have a nice season, but again, that is going to be a big rise up for him, and we'll see how he's going to be able to handle it. And I think that this team is going to be interesting as well with Middle Tennessee. They're always rock solid on defense. They didn't generate as many turnovers as they typically do in the past last season, but I like the fact that they bring in James Dent, who he began his career over at Western Illinois. They've got back a few guys from the last few seasons like Kamari Lands and company, some 6'8" versatility with Torrey Olson coming back as well. How do you take a look at a Middle Tennessee team that it doesn't feel like they do one thing great, but they do a lot of things solid?
Yeah, they get the job done. That's kind of been their motto the past couple of years, especially this year and in 2021. Those were their really, really peak good years. They 20-win team last year, and they lose Justin Porter, who was absolutely phenomenal. Big fan of him. I thought he was one of the best guards in Conference USA. So we'll see how they go into this year. I think the big thing for them is they need to shoot the ball well. They need to shoot the ball well. They don't really project to do that on paper, but you never know with a lot of these guys that haven't played, or a lot of these transfers that really, didn't make a big mark at the Division I level, or maybe don't even come from the Division I level, like Charvez Ambrose. I know he's a community college guy that I was looking at. Big fan of his. So we'll see with the Blue Raiders. They're a tough team to play on the road. I know they're really, really good at home, and I don't know if they're going to be as good as last year, but they have a shot, and everybody has a shot to compete in this conference. So just throw your hat in the ring, see what happens from there.
Absolutely, and we threw our hat in the ring for taking a look at Conference USA today with you, Zay. I know that you're doing a tremendous job out there at ESPN Radio in El Paso. I know that you're doing absolutely tremendous work taking a look at this amazing conference as well. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I had a blast talking college hoops. If want to get some of my content on Twitter or X, Instagram, it's on UTEP Zay, at UTEP Zay on all platforms. Big photographer. I love photography. So if you like sports photography or photography in general, that's really my main niche right now. So, go ahead and follow me on there.
Absolutely. And Zay doing an amazing job taking a look at all things Conference USA and so much more. So big thanks to Zay for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VC Family Podcast. I mean, next it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for Conference USA. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Zay Galindo, who does such great work over at 600 ESPN El Paso out there in the great state of Texas. He's doing an amazing job taking a look at the minors, all things Conference USA, and so much more. So big thanks to Zay for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for Conference USA. Second straight day of doing a conference preview. So if we had any news and notes that happened in the last 2 days in college basketball, those are going to be polished up on the podcast tomorrow. I have no fear there, but we do want to give as much sparkle and shine to these conference previews as humanly possible, and we want to make them as grand as they can be. And at dead last, in terms of my projector or finish, I'm going to be going with Delaware. Delaware, they had a rough time out there in the CAA last year, and the CAA, I would say, is relatively on par with Conference USA. If you're looking at the overall bottom teams, Conference USA has fewer bottom teams. If you're looking at the creme de la creme teams, maybe a little bit less. But when it comes to this Delaware bunch, they were very much based around their three-point shooting last year. Last season, they were a top 25 team with regards to their three-point shooting, but they lose John Camden, who is averaging 16-plus points per contest. Kevon Riley's back, about 12.5 points per contest, and Justin Fernandez is going to be coming in for Providence. I know he began his career over at George Mason, but never was really too much of a contributor. Now was a career about 38.5% three-point shooter. Nana Njoku, I think, could be able to give you a bit of something, a former top 150 recruit that comes in. He should be able to give you a little bit of size, but still, this is a team that's going to get dominated down low. being able to get Tyler Hauser back after he was able to average about 5 points per contest 2 seasons ago helps out a little bit as well. And then McCon Emery, he's able to give you a bit of production with like 3 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but for Delaware, their defense was very much lackadaisical last year. This team does not have much down low. I think that they're going to struggle in this conference. I've got Delaware at dead last in terms of my projector or finish. At number 11, we're going to be going Sam Houston State. I do like the fact that they bring in Po' Boy King, who was over at NC Central last season, 16.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest, and Isaiah Manning has a chance to be a little bit of an X factor. Former top 250 recruit by 247 Sports in the 2023 class, but I mean, they're relying upon someone like Joko Ilic, who was able to average about 8 points, 5 rebounds per game over at Loyola Maryland last year. Brennan Burns, he's able to give you a bit of something, but they lose so much from a season ago. They lose each other top 6 scorers. They were below 500 for just the second time in the last 21 years last season. I think that this is going to be the third time in the last 22. I just don't see a lot of depth with this team. So Sam Houston State had to go ahead and put them at number 11 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 10, I'm going to be going with Missouri State. They went 2-18 in the Missouri Valley Conference last year. I would say that the Missouri Valley Conference is a little bit better than Conference USA, and they do bring back Michael Osi Borusu, who was able to give the team 11 points, 7.5 boards, but he's only about 6'5". He's going to be a little bit undersized for this league. You bring in Antoine Burton. He over at Grambling was able to shoot about 38.5% from three-point range, and I do like his overall game. Amar Kuljujovic, who was last season playing over at North Dakota at 6'8", 10.5 points, 6.8 rebounds per game. So, I mean, you've got some rock-solid players there. The John A. Logan transfer and Cameron Boone should be able to give you a bit of something down low, but, I mean, they need to improve upon the fact that they were 347th in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage. Inside the arc and down low, they just weren't that great, and 345th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They really don't have too much with regards to a point guard on this team, and I think that is going to be a big concern. So for Missouri State, I did place them at number 10 in terms of my projector finish. At number 9, I'm going to be going Florida National. Florida National has had over the last few years that one real go-to guy and not much else. I think that Zwade Jackson is going to be able to step up and have a really nice year this year. Comes in from New Mexico State, 10.5 points, 3 assists, and a steal per contest. And when he was at the Division II level over at West Georgia was rock solid as well. Getting back Ashton Williamson is going to help. 7 points, a little bit over a steal per contest as Florida National year in and year out, they get after it. They're a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they should be more well-rounded. Britt Harris comes in after he had about 11.5 points per contest. You've got a guy that I like in Corey Stevenson, who he comes in from Meet the Roadrunners of Cal State Bakersfield, 11.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. Julian Mackey was able to give you 15 points per game as well. Still not a lot down low for this team. I do think that's going to be a concern with Florida National. I did indeed put them at number 9 in my projector finish. At number 8, we're going to be going with Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State, they won 23 games, which was their second highest output in program history last year, but they do lose 7 out of their top 8 scorers. Jamar Franklin is the main guy that returns 10.5 points on 41.3% three-point shooting for a team that was relatively solid with their three-point shooting, but they're 49th in the nation in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They weren't able to generate a lot there. A.C. Bryant, who was able to average 14 points per game over at Alabama A&M, he's pretty rock solid. Toby Naduzi, he was a MEAC Player of the Year last year over at Coppin State, 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, nearly 2.5 steals per contest. I like him. And Mustafa El Montequil, who was over at Louisiana, nice versatile player. He's able to give you about 14.5 points per game. I think that this team is still going to be solid down low, but losing so many pieces from last year, I do think it is going to be a bit costly. And with Jacksonville State, I did put them in my projector finish at number 8. Number 7, going with Western Kentucky. You've got Cameron Effner, who's going to be able to elevate this offense. He was averaging 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game last season over at Eastern Illinois. And then Brian Settlebongwe, he was a very good contributor over at Tulsa 2 seasons ago. 9.5 boards, 12.5 points per contest. But what are you going to be able to get out of him now is a big question mark, as he last year at McNeese, 3.7 points, 4.3 rebounds per game. You've got further size with being able to bring in someone like a Louis Simona, who had 13 points, 4 boards on 37.5% three-point shooting. Grant Newell at 6'9" is able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game. So I like the team's overall size. Just really are going to be lacking a little bit in terms of backcourt. That does have me feeling a little bit questionable about this team, and that's why I did sink them down to number 7 in terms of my projector finish. At number 6, I do go with UTEP. UTEP was 15th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they lose each other top 7 scores. Now, I do like the versatility of Jamal West. 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, block and half per contest. You've got Kasim Watson, who comes on over from Delaware State, 15.5 points, nearly 6 boards, shot 36% from three-point range, while Tyrese Watson, he comes in from Louisiana Monroe. So you've got Watson squared, 12 points, 4.5 assists, 1.7 steals per contest. L.A. Hayes, he was, according to JUCOrecruiting.com, the number 28 junior college transfer in terms of the 2025 cycle, averaged 17 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, 2 steals per contest over at Frank Phillips College, so that'll help out. And Mohamed Mbe, he was over at New Mexico Junior College, 13.5 points per contest. This should help out a team that was 348th in the country in terms of rebound rate. I think that this is going to be a little bit of a new look team, but perhaps a little bit more of a well-rounded team. So as a result, UTEP I do have at number 6 in terms of my projector finish. At number 5, we're going to be going with New Mexico State. New Mexico State was 6th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage last year, 29.5%, 72nd overall in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and they're going to look to dominate the glass. Got Carice Mullen, who comes on over from Hampton, 7.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Julius Mims, about 6.3 boards, a block, 8.5 points per game over at Idaho. And then you've got Elijah Elliott, who comes in from UT Rio Grande Valley, the Vaqueros, where 2 years ago he was averaging 16.5 points per contest, and he was a little bit banged up last season while he was over at Southern Illinois, appearing in just 5 games. But Jamel Jones, he was Bakersfield meet for the Roadrunners' top scorer. Nearly 19 points per game on 35% three-point shooting. Add in there a guy from Southern Indiana, Jalen Randall, 15-plus points per contest. And Chris Terrell was really good over at Delta State. Division II scorer, 21 points, 3.8 assists, 3.3 steals per game. I think that this New Mexico State team going to be very rock solid and pretty stout on defense. So with New Mexico State, place them at number 5 in terms of my projector finish. And number 4, we're going to be going with Middle Tennessee. They have to replace each of their top 4 scorers from a season ago, but got a pair of 6'8" combo players that I think are going to be really rock solid for this team, as I really do like what you've got out of Tori Ellison along Kamari Lands. Lands last season was able to average 8 points as a part-time starter. Olsen, 6 points, a little bit over 5 boards, made 20 starts last season. And you got Sean Smith, who's able to give you 10.5 points, 4.5 boards. This team was 55th in opponents' three-point shooting percentage last year. So you know that they're going to be able to do a relatively solid job on defense. Their turnover rate have been a little bit hit or miss over the last few years, so they're going to need to look to shore that up a little bit more. I do think that they're going to be able to do so, and additionally, I do think that having a few non-Division I transfers coming in is going to be able to help hold down the fort for this Middle Tennessee team. They do have a few unknowns, but this is a coaching staff that really does a great job of being able to get out a lot out of these guys. Having someone like a Trey Green back in the fold as well, I think is very big, as he's been a nice little mixer and shaker for the team over the last few seasons as well. So with James Dent also coming in, I do think that Middle Tennessee is going to be a pretty rock solid team. I do have them in my projector finish at number 4. Number 3, we're going to be going with Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is just a steady Eddie team with regards to their low post presence. Now, the Bacho man, Daniel Bacho, is no longer with the program, so that does hurt to see him a little bit, but you've got guys like Caden Cooper and AJ Bates to be able to hold out in the backcourt, and Scooter Williams, who comes on over from East Texas A&M, nice double-figure scorer for them, a pretty rock-solid defender, I think is going to be able to help out the cause as well. Additionally, you've been able to get some really good production. You've been able to get a lot of just elevation in general at the junior college level from Kylan Housey. He was the number 44 rated junior college transfer according to JUCOrecruiting.com. He's going to help out down low. 6.5 boards, 2.6 blocks per contest over at Jones College last season at 6'9". 6'9", Sir Isaac Heron, who he pretty much missed all of last season. 2 years ago at Oral Roberts, was a relatively solid three-point shooter. He should be able to help this team. And for Louisiana Tech last year, 28th in the country in opponent's three-point shooting percentage, with Cooper bringing back 7.5 boards, a steal and a half, 9.5 points per game. I think that this team, once again, going to be very solid on defense. I've got Louisiana Tech at number 3 in terms of my projector finish. At number 2, go Owls. It's Kennesaw State. They need to improve an offense that was 244th in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis and cut down on those turnovers. 323rd in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis, but you got Devin Cosby, who comes in from Wake Forest. I think that he's going to be able to elevate his game after averaging 5.5 points per contest in a 17-game sample size last season. Perry Smith Jr. comes in from NC Central, 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, and Simeon Cottle might be the best player in this conference. 18 points, 3 assists per contest last season. You also bring back Braden Liu, who skipped to my Lou was able to give you 5.5 boards, 7 points per contest. Jamel Miller, 6.5 points and nearly 5 rebounds per game. And with having 6'5" Franquan Sherman back, after he nearly gave you 5 rebounds per contest for a team that was 36th in the country in terms of rebound percentage, I think that this team is going to be very stout down low. I think that they're going to once again be very dominant on the glass. Again, those turnover woes are going to be a little bit of an issue, but Ron G. Gordon coming back at 6'8" gives this team even more size, and RJ Johnson is a little bit of a nice little X factor for this team who saw a few minutes last season. So with Kennesaw State, I did put them in my projector finish at number 2. And number 1, it's old Liberty Bibberty, the Liberty Flames, one of the best three-point shooting teams on the road in all of college basketball last season, and bring back a guy in Zach Cleveland who's just so versatile for the team. With Zach Cleveland, he stands right in that neighborhood, about 6'7" or so, and he was able to fill it up. 10.5 points, 6.3 boards, 5 assists, and a block per contest for a team that was 21st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home last season. Then again, that 3-point shooting percentage, 38.7% in a road/neutral venue last season. Colin Porter, he's back after he gave the team 9 points, a steal and a half on 43% 3-point shooting. Isaiah Enhen, he's going to be back after he was limited last season with about 10.5 points, 39% 3-point shooter. Brett Decker, he shot off the bench 44.2% from 3-point. Should be able to help them out. Would like to see a little bit more rebounding. Team was 360th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, rebounding just 17.7% of their missed shots. And you've got Ryan Jones Jr., who should be able to help, number 90 ranked freshman according to 247 Sports in the class of 2024, was on the bench for Virginia Tech last year, should be able to come in, give this team some nice minutes. So we are going with Liberty to win Conference USA this season. That'll wrap things up for the Conference USA Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Zay Galindo. He does great work over at 600 ESPN Radio in El Paso. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'll be coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Take care.